42 inches in diameter and 300 miles long. It will transport natural gas from Wetzel County, West Virginia to Pittsylvania County, Virginia. The project was started in 2014 by several energy companies, namely EQT Midstream Partners and NextEra Energy, and it has been controversial from the beginning. In this video, I aim to capture a few of the many involved voices.
The topics discussed in this video include energy demand, safety, the environment, eminent domain, service pipes, few permits being denied, and ideals in the standard of living. The first topic addressed is energy demand.
If you want your community, your sector, your state to grow industrially and in business-wise, you've got to look into the future and put enough equipment on site to attract customers.
One of the things that people have been calling for along the pipeline fight is renewable energy, and particularly solar and wind. And the advantage of solar and wind, and to some extent geothermal, is that they're distributed. It's not just that these technologies are renewable and don't produce climate-causing greenhouse gas emissions, although the mining might cause a little bit. It's also that they can be used at a more local level.
Both at a local and global level, a primary concern for people is safety, specifically explosions. Mr. Mahaney and Mr. Chisholm speak from opposing views on the matter.
I've been around construction of gas-fired boilers, utility plants, power plants, and small ones from domestic plants up to the biggest we make. And natural gas will not ignite unless they have an outside source, a lighter to light it, or some flame thrown into it to get it going. You need a lighter. You need a starter to make it burn.
But as we've seen with two very high-profile recent disasters, brand new pipelines are collapsing under the destabilized slopes where they've installed these things and exploding, and so far, thankfully, haven't killed anybody.
The severity of danger to people is controversial, but doubtlessly present. There is also danger to the environment.
So this is everything from erosion and sediment that leaves the site and ends up in streams and creeks that eventually feed somebody's groundwater, to potentially breaking and damaging the karst terrain that is going through and contaminating underground reservoirs.
The world isn't stopping climate emissions, and this is going to basically double Virginia's carbon footprint equivalent, because it's methane, but it's the equivalent to carbon. So the kinds of effects that that's going to have are dramatic in terms of migration, in terms of threatening food supplies, wars over water and resources. It threatens the ability for our civilization to survive in its current form. And so that's not something that should be discounted.
Another problem that shouldn't be discounted is eminent domain, which Ms. Satterwhite does a good job of expositing.
One major concern is that the pipeline is unneeded. There is no demand for natural gas. Mostly it's intended for export, which means it's an illegitimate use of eminent domain, which is taking people's property if you can establish public necessity.
For example, there's a couple of people who actively farm their properties. Those properties are now in the process of being seized by eminent domain, this is of course a power that is typically granted to the government for projects that have a public benefit. And the more that we learn about this project, the less of that public need or public benefit we saw. So using a very traumatizing, dangerous kind of process such as eminent domain, seizing and condemning people's land for industrial purposes, seeing those impacts and understanding that there really is no benefit for our region, particularly no benefit for those farmers, people in the community.
These are both substantial arguments. But if eminent domain is a major issue with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, why hasn't similar opposition arose over service pipes? Mr. Mahaney and Mr. Chisholm speak from their perspectives on the similarities and differences of these pipes.
I don't think most people understand how many pipes we got underground, but the companies just keep doing it slowly, and the population accepts it because there's no problems. If they'll just be patient with this MVP line, let it get built, let it operate, get used to it, then they'll be happy again.
This is a 42-inch diameter pipe. It's 300 and just over 300 miles long, pushing a massive amount of pressure, and purely a transmission system. So it's not like local service lines. Those types of projects pop up wherever you are. That's not what this is. So yeah, it's a very different thing to try to organize around and to try to stop.
Few pipeline permits have been denied despite high levels of protest. Why is that the case?
Only denied 2 out of 400 pipeline permits since 1999. And the 2 permits that they denied were denied on the basis of a lack of commercial support for those projects. They weigh that so-called commercial or economic support contracts basically against the environmental concerns, but that wasn't the determining factor in those 2 denials.
It isn't enough to say there will be environmental harm. They effectively say we know there will be environmental harm, but the environmental harm is not enough to outweigh these other interests. And the shipper has shown that they have the contracts, and so therefore, with adjustments to the route or adjustments to the erosion and sediment control plans or adjustments to the construction plans and construction schedule, they kind of basically steer the companies through the process to get approved, as opposed to saying we have all of this overwhelming pushback from the communities that you're trying to go through, and they've shown us water studies and the danger to the community from the route and its proximity to, say, concentrated population centers or whatever. And so therefore, based on those reasons, we're going to deny this because the public has said we don't want it.
Like any other capitalist enterprise, is concerned foremost with short-term profit, and if that causes people to be hurt or causes the environment to suffer, that's not part of that consideration. It doesn't affect their profit margin. So that kind of centralized technology really lends itself to a very centralized system that creates.
In essence, the question is what's best for people, whether in relation to jobs, products, the quality of the world for future generations, or other factors. Important elements are ideals and the standard of living.
And that outside pressure is something that movements have traditionally done to make this country live up to what they saw as this country's highest ideals. So there's many ideals behind this country. If you want to live up to the highest ones, like the most small d democratic ones, then that pressure comes from the outside.
That's what we're here for, to make things as well as we can while we're here and let the next generation do better. The government knows that. That's why the state of Virginia and the government have both agreed that they would go along with the Federal Energy Commission because they understand the needs.
As you've hopefully seen within the last few minutes, the Mountain Valley Pipeline is much more than just a steel tube. It has far-reaching effects from those on the local environment and local landowners to those on the global environment and global economy. Similar issues will arise, and varying stances will once again be taken.